Hello, everyone, and welcome to this masterclass on boundaries and your menstrual cycle. I'm so excited to be here today because if you know me, you'll know that anything related to the menstrual cycle gets me very excited. I love to change the narrative around how we perceive and think about the menstrual cycle and challenge this negative perception of it being seen as an inconvenience by society to being something that actually empowers us and supports us on our journey. And of course, I don't say that without any consideration to people suffering from either absent periods, painful periods, really irregular periods. But those are super valuable indicators that something is out of balance and we can work to address those. So good news, there is support available. And there are ways to manage some of these symptoms. But of course, pain is pain, isn't it? So what I'm trying to say is that that's not a reason to think of your menstrual cycle as something limiting. I think you can find power and lessons in every situation. So with that said, I want to start us off today with a small meditation. We're going to be going through the meditation, and then we will look at values, identifying boundaries, and communicating boundaries. And I hope that we'll be able to cover everything in the next remaining of the hour that we have. So for now, just find a nice, comfortable seated position. This is as much for me as it is for you. So shuffle around until you find your seat. And once we're there, you can bring the hands onto the knees and tune into your breathing. Any energy that you might have picked up from the past week or so, being around different people, speaking to different people, think about sending that energy back to them. And once you've done that, you can begin to call your energy back to you. You can visualize a sense of something returning or a color, whatever it is. So today, I really encourage you to hold some space for yourself as we go through this training or this masterclass. We're going to start by bringing our hands just in front of us here. You might notice the elbows drop to the side. I'd like you to just lift them up. We're not lifting the shoulders, keeping the shoulders back and down. The elbows are nice and high in line with the shoulders. And we can start to just separate the hands so that the fingertips are touching. The thumbs can be relaxed. But the most important thing here is to have the elbows raised, shoulders back and down, chest forward and up. And just breathe into this space, creating this time for yourself, this space for yourself, and consideration for this. Embodying the boundaries that we're going to set together today. You might notice the elbows start to drop down. When they do, just bring them back up. Protecting your energy. Nice. On the next inhale, we're going to open up the arms. And just here, go as far as you would like to. So you can stay with the hands quite close together, or you can bring them out a little bit further. Your arms are starting to ache, that's okay. See if you can find softness in the shoulders, in the back, and in the neck. Nice. We're going to drop the hands down to the knees now and start tapping at the chest. So relationships hold a lot of charge, and tapping releases any pent-up energy. It's a really simple method to activate the flow of energy and to come into the present moment. The chest stores kind of emotional stagnation. So just know that by tapping, you are releasing this. You can tap as softly or as hard as you'd like. Bring to mind someone you'd like to set boundaries with. And I invite you to start like a verbal stream of consciousness with that person. So if you do have the space to do this aloud, do that. If not, you can have this conversation in your head. Really let this be an open conversation where you can talk freely out loud without censoring what you're saying. Just let it kind of roll out. It's supposed to be messy. So go for it. Okay, once you've done that for a while, you can bring the tapping down towards the solar plexus, the area responsible for our sense of empowerment. So just above the navel area here. This is a good area to practice powerful affirmations. And if affirmations feel a bit uncomfortable to you at the beginning, then that's actually a good sign. It means that they're working. It means that they're bringing to surface things, beliefs about yourself that you might not have noticed beforehand. So don't worry if these affirmations don't feel quite right at the beginning, but let's give them a go together. So as you tap, practice affirming, I am allowed to protect my energy. Breathe out. I am allowed to protect my energy. Nice. We're going to go down a little bit further into the sacral chakra. So now just below the navel, below the belly button, into the womb space. You can affirm, I am stepping into my power. I am stepping into my power. Nice. Now you can tap the legs all the way down to the feet. And then bring the hands to the knees. Visualize the breath moving from the root, from the base of the spine, all the way through the body, up to the crown of the head. Think of violet and golden light surrounding you as you breathe in. And as you breathe out, imagine the light rising from the root all the way up through the center and above the head. This energy work is going to give us the clarity that we need to set and uphold our boundaries. So now that we've got that done, we're going to move on to some of the more practical steps. I'm just moving forward so I can get out my slides. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to start. So if you don't have a paper and pen with you, I suggest you go and get one, because we're going to be just doing a bit of journaling, scribbling some ideas down, and some things that are going to be super, super valuable for you to take through into your life and for you to take that charge and responsibility over your own decisions, actions in a way that serves you. So I hope that wasn't really rambly, but if you're still with me, just bear with me while I get up the slides. Okay, so here we have our boundaries and the menstrual and moon cycle presentation. So we've done the embodiment work, the energy work. How do boundaries link in with the menstrual cycle? So how do boundaries link into the menstrual? So how do boundaries link into the menstrual cycle? Menstruation can be used to assess how your energy levels have been and understand what you need in life. So menstruation or the new moon, which as you can see here is a time where we can't actually see the moon in the sky, is an amazing time for inner reflection and to actually think about what you want to bring in, but also, how your energy levels have been so far. So you can use this in relation to boundaries to think of how your boundaries might have affected you so far and what might you need to be implementing in the new cycle, whether it's the moon cycle or the menstrual. The follicular phase is a time where you can set some intentions. And remember, this is a guide inspired by our nature, our natural flows. It's not something you need to kind of subscribe to like 100%, otherwise something's going to happen. It's not like that. And I know that we get a lot of that from different like nutrition tips and different life tips. So just maintain your own autonomy as we go through this. Take what resonates. Excuse me. You can try things that feel accessible, that feel, interesting, curious. You have fun with it, play around with it. It's not a religious text by any means. So follicular phase, a great time for setting intentions. What boundaries do you need to reinforce in your life? Ovulation, this is when we can think about communication, when we can think about expressing our boundaries, when we can do hard things. So we can do hard things in all of these phases, in all of the moon phases. But the things that feel particularly challenging and sticky, ovulation is an amazing time to go for it. Ovulation or the full moon. So here it's time to be brave and assert your boundaries with confidence and clarity. Just kind of going back a step, you can see here that you can use the waxing moon as follicular phase, and you can use the waning moon as luteal phase, which we're coming on to next. So luteal is always one where I say we need to up the self-care there because our inner critic can come out. Not always our inner critic, sometimes our inner guide could be like, hey, this needs attention, like this thing is a sticky point, or so up the self-care and be really gentle with yourself around this time. If you find yourself being harsh towards yourself, practice that forgiveness towards that, and just know that this is part of the cycle. It's okay. Things pissing you off in your premenstrual that wouldn't usually, that's a clear sign and invitation from your body to explore your boundaries. Sometimes in my luteal phase, I come to realize what friendships might be kind of taking up a lot of my energy, or I'm putting energy into them when actually I want to be directing it into something else. So you can use it as a sort of identifier, as a highlighter, like, oh wait, this is something that needs looking at. And it's also true that it could be something that you only need to put boundaries in for one phase of your cycle. So maybe it's just in the luteal phase where you want to put a boundary in with one specific person. But then again, I really think the luteal phase has a lot of wisdom and can tell us things that are often masked in our ovulation phase, because our well, if we're going by a natural cycle, the estrogen levels rise in this phase, and this can often mask those more calming and I guess down to earth effects of progesterone. So don't ignore what's going on there. Sometimes it can take a while to just get the courage to act on whatever comes in luteal phase. So again, be gentle with yourself. You're your own inner cheerleader, unwavering self-compassion. That's what we're all about. That's what we're here for. So moving on, let's start with our values. So, sorry, I just looked over there because I think my incense has been burning for a very long time and it's getting stuffy. So bear with me, but have a think. What are your top values? What mission and legacy do you have? Do you not have one? Bringing to mind this creation of our own purpose. Just take a minute to ponder on that. And if you have never thought about this before, just write that down. Write this down as a new concept. I'm reading a brilliant book at the moment called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And she asks this wonderful question. What's the most beautiful and true life you can imagine for yourself? Write this down in your journal. Maybe close down the eyes. Take a minute to just think about what this could be. I'll give you that minute now. Okay, so this question, what's the most beautiful and true life you can imagine for yourself, is one that I invite you to take with you over the next week and just ponder it. It can either be quite actively by taking moments to journal, or it can just be there, in the background of your mind, just to think about, if you're on the tube or whatever it is. Let this be the theme, because this is what we can start moving towards, what we can start constructing. I think so many women believe that the most beautiful and true version of their life is not possible or accessible to them. But this is where responsibility for our own actions come in, and where boundaries comes in as well, because there are things, always choices that we can make, things that we can do to move towards that, towards whatever it is that we value. So the next question I want to ask you is related to your mission. This is the foundation of the boundaries that we might set. So your mission, getting a bit dark now. Well, I don't really think it's dark, but some people might. Imagine yourself standing over your own deathbed. You're at your own funeral, and all the people you love are around you in the room, celebrating your life. What would you like them to say about you? You can write this down, take another minute. You can think about groups. So what would you like your family to say about you? What would you like your partner, closest friend to say about you? What would you like your work colleagues to say about you? And any other, maybe like a community you might be involved with, or just the general public. Okay, that's your minute up. You might be like, what? No, I need way longer than a minute to write all this down. And I agree with you. You do need longer than a minute. But, give yourself the space to ponder this over the next week. I really want this to be something that feels sustainable, not something that you think about once and leave behind, something that really is anchoring points in your life journey that you can come back to and think, actually, this is what's really, really important to me, and this is what it's all about for me. So we'll leave that there, knowing that you can come back to it. And I would love to hear your reflections. So let me know what you're reflecting on as I'm saying these words, what's coming through to you. Moving on to identifying boundaries. So, what does the term boundaries actually bring up for you? What does the word boundaries feel like in your body? For some people, boundaries can feel like self-care. But for many of us, and if you're watching this masterclass, and I'm willing to bet that that's you as well, can feel guilt associated with the word boundaries, or we can feel as if that's putting up a wall or putting distance. And I'm going to tell you, actually, I'm not going to say that's not true, because it has a element of truth to it. But the issue isn't the distance. The issue is how it's impacting your life. So every time you say yes to something that you want to say no to, what are you allowing in your life? Or every time you say no to something you wish you said yes to, again, what are you allowing there? So if we move on, here you can see some signs that we might need to work on boundaries. Have you ever been around someone who's in a bad mood and then you can't help but get in a bad mood too? And just to say, some of these things I'm about to talk about really stem from childhood or from our earlier experiences. And I invite you to look at these with a sense of curiosity, a sense of interest, like, oh, that's interesting. I can see a link there. And quite often when I do this with people, they can make a link quite quickly. So the first one that I'm going to point out, these are 8 things, 8 signs, 8 ways to identify the boundaries that maybe you need to set in your life. So if you're finding that it's really difficult to make decisions, that decisions are hard, this can often stem from being told what to do or not feeling like we had our voice listened to in childhood. As adults, it can come up as being indecisive about really, small things, also big things. So this is where we work on tuning back into our gut, where maybe the boundary is about not sharing all of our thought processes with everybody. 2, saying no feels selfish and guilt-probing. So we spoke about this earlier, about the guilt maybe being associated with the word boundaries. I think this is especially relevant if you have been raised in a kind of family culture. For me, it's particularly relevant having been raised in the UK, but coming from an Arab background that is very family oriented. I always had those two kind of opposing things where actually I felt really cool to put in certain boundaries, but at the same time felt really bad for doing them and for doing that. So this is okay, and this can happen for a range of reasons. But as an adult, you can start working on that. And you can also start feeling the guilt and feeling the selfishness, knowing that it will pass and knowing that actually you are not allowing any kind of people-pleasing tendencies to ease your anxiety. You are facing it head on. Sometimes people-pleasing tendencies can come as a way to ease or mask our anxiety through other people, and it doesn't get to the root of the issue. So, number 3, apologizing when you haven't done anything wrong. Apologize to your dad and he'll come and talk to you again. For example, that's something I got all the time as a kid. Whenever I might have done something that my dad didn't like. So it wasn't necessarily because I'd done anything wrong. Sometimes it was just apologizing for something simple like speaking up for myself. You might have a similar story or a very different one. Either way, this can stem from various reasons. So if you're feeling me, if you're starting to paint a picture in your head of where it could have originated, I'm here if you want to share it. So apologizing when you haven't done anything wrong. This can come out in really small ways, like, oh, I'm sorry I didn't respond to you immediately. I was XYZ. Over-explaining ourselves for making our decision. Number 4, being adverse to conflict, avoiding it wherever possible. Thinking that speaking up is akin or is the same as starting a fight. Learned behavior. What we're doing now is unlearning and reclaiming our power, reclaiming our ability to live in connection to ourselves, in connection to our inner power, to follow our gut instinct, to follow our sense of imagination. So the words that might come up for us like need or should, they often come from conditioning. So just start to notice if these words come up for you in your thought process, like, oh, I need to do this, or I should be doing that. And just question for a minute, where's that coming from? And how can you reframe it? Reframe it to something coming from you. Like, I would love to do X, Y, or Z. I'm working towards doing X, Y, and Z, because have your why there. And your why is going to be linked back to the values that we spoke about at the beginning. And this is how we start aligning our intentions with our actions, when we start being really clear on what it is that we're here for, the purpose that we've created for ourselves, and living by that. You starting to feel me? Good. So number 5, we spoke about this earlier, people pleasing, not being able to tolerate the fact that some people might not like you when you stop being a people pleaser. I'm going to completely turn this on its head and say to you that if people stop liking you when you stop people pleasing, then that's a clear sign that you're on the right track. Because that's not usually how it works. If you've come from, if you've been people pleasing your whole life and suddenly you stop and you realize people don't seem to be liking you as much, one, we can't really tell that, but two, it usually means that we're going to create stronger bonds and stronger relationships with those that we do connect with, because you can be yourself around them, right? Naturally, that's more comfortable. Naturally, that reduces any chance of burnout because you are being yourself with somebody. It's bloody exhausting when you're like needing to shape yourself in a different way to fit in. And we do this, if we're used to doing this, and we do this without really realizing, and then we wonder, oh, why am I so tired? I've slept okay, my diet's okay, why am I so tired? So just let this understanding settle in. Awareness is always the first step to change. Number 6, spreading ourselves thin, maybe meeting up with everyone, the auntie that's come to visit, the friend that you haven't seen in a long time, that you don't really speak to, but you want to see. Well, at least you think you do. Going to that dance class, but also going to this event, just doing a lot of different things. And this is where our menstrual cycle can really help, or the moon cycles, because we can allow ourselves in the month some downtime for reflection, for coziness, for being in our own energy. And then we can use the other parts of the cycles to, do those more outwards things, like connecting with other people, networking, partying, whatever it is. Swaying too much on one side or the other can lead to spreading ourselves thin. And that includes spreading ourselves thin by spending too much time in downtime in our own world, because actually this prevents connection. Just think about what that balance looks like in your life at the moment. And again, try and link it back to the values and mission that you thought about in the beginning. Are the people that you're planning to meet up with aligned with those values and that mission? So feeling resentful of other people who have boundaries. Now, this can come up in a way of judgment, like, oh, that person's not very friendly, or oh, how dare they not want to spend time with me, you know? And I remember when I first got into a healthy relationship, my partner had a lot of boundaries around his time and around, his kind of focus time. And I remember at the beginning feeling quite uncomfortable with this and taking it almost a bit personally. And this made me reflect on my own boundaries around my time and around my focus. And I realized my focus wasn't on point, and neither was my own acknowledgement of how important my time was. So this was an amazing mirror that he held up back to myself that allowed me to then put healthy boundaries in place. Number 8, lack of awareness of our energy levels and availability. So we've covered some of this before in terms of spreading ourselves thin, but our energy levels can be noticed by simply sitting down for 1 minute. I promise you, it will just take you 1 minute each day. Maybe placing your hand on your heart, maybe on hands on the knees, or whatever you're feeling, just saying, how am I today? And allowing the body to respond. Labeling your emotion or energy levels can be super helpful. But I will say that even if you don't have a word to describe it, sensing is very powerful in itself, and sensing into your energy level can be enough. So 1 minute of sensing in, feeling in, is just as powerful as writing a million words. And I really, really want to highlight that, because I think as women, we are almost distracted from that by so many different things, and not because we're distractible, but because society has placed so many different expectations on us, to ultimately disconnect us from our power and our sensing abilities. We're being taught to adapt to a patriarchal working pattern, for example, of 9 to 5, get up same time every day, do the same things every day. I talk a lot about this in relation to consistency. What is consistency? And how does consistency support us? So starting to question these patriarchal methods that exist within society and refinding our own ways. And nature can inspire this. And this is what I love to talk about. Okay, I'm running over time, so let's move on. So journal now, just for the next minute again. What are some signs that indicate you might need to establish new boundaries in your life? So list all the areas where you can establish some boundaries. Okay, just finish whatever sentence you're on if you haven't already, and pick one thing. We're going to start with one thing. We're going to get real practical. So communication. You may need to say things you've never said before. You may need to get it wrong and have it be messy. It's kind of part of the process. So with that one thing that you've picked from the previous page, the previous exercise, close your eyes and imagine yourself communicating. You can either imagine it or you can practice saying it out loud. Just a sentence. When we're working with communication around boundaries, remember it's about you. It's not about the other person. We're not putting boundaries in to control the actions of others. We're putting boundaries in to reclaim our control over our own actions. So, for example, I used to have an issue with my mum commenting about my body or other people's bodies. And this would be quite triggering for me at the time. So I had to put in a boundary there. I had to say, I feel uncomfortable when you speak about either my body or other people's bodies. Please, can we not talk about this? And, she gave me the whole, but I'm your mum, if I don't speak about this with you, then who will, etc., etc. And this made it feel very difficult for me to establish that boundary. I learned the hard way so that you don't have to. And just thought, okay, what can I control in this situation? She might still bring this topic up. I can choose that I don't want to engage in the conversation. So I then said to her another day, look, if you bring this up, I'm not going to engage with the conversation. And that's it. Again, she was quite uncomfortable and hurt by this boundary. So sometimes we need to let it be messy, as I mentioned. But she just stopped bringing it up. Like she stopped, not in the first time, but the second time when I focused more on what I will be doing. And some of these boundaries don't need to be super confrontational. Sometimes you can place them in for yourself and give yourself the permission to do that. Of course, communication, where possible, is always best. But if that's something that really feels difficult, then just know you can still put in a boundary without, letting a huge fight happen. But what I would encourage is have the fight, have the messiness, because that's how you'll grow like never before. I promise you. And I am here for you when you do that. So you can come back to me and say, Noor, I put in this boundary, it went tits up. Like, now what? Well, actually, if you say now what, I will ask that same question back to you, because I believe that you have the source of the knowledge, the expertise about your life, and we'll just work on bringing that out of you. So, I'm not encouraging go and have fights, but what I am encouraging is be brave. Don't let that put you off. That's part of the reason that poor boundaries happen in the first place. And the reason we need boundaries is so that we can have healthy relationships with people. Sometimes what we learn growing up is not the healthiest way to interact with others. So by practicing, you'll not only be placing your boundaries, but you will be an example of someone who is. You will be giving permission for others to also put their boundaries in place. So here you can see, so boundaries is understanding where you stop and someone else begins. This is you, this is someone else, these other people. Taking back responsibilities and our control over ourselves and our choices is what it's all about. It's about what we will and we won't do, what we'll tolerate and what we'll not. It's about our actions and not the actions of others. So, once you've worked up the courage and you've decided you're going to address something or place in a boundary with somebody, I recommend having a if X then Y kind of thing planned in your mind. So boundaries are really for any relationship, whether it's a healthy relationship, whether it's a toxic relationship. But sometimes we cut people off because we just don't know how to uphold boundaries. So sometimes it could be something that has a lot of potential for it to be a healthy relationship, but we actually think, oh, that person's not good for me, so I don't want to be friends with them, they're not respecting my boundaries. But maybe it's actually because we don't know how to uphold them. Maybe we've said that we wouldn't tolerate something and then we did. So again, bring this back to you. Bring this back to what you will do when it comes with making decisions, right? There's no real right or wrong decision. There is just a decision. And there's an honoring of the outcome, no matter what. There's honoring of your own decision. Remember, if you ever make a decision that hasn't worked out well, you can step up and say, yeah, I made a mistake and I've learned this now. And that's perfectly acceptable. That's allowed. So, for example, you can say, let's go to the next slide. Say you're at work and you've spoken with your manager about the fact that you keep getting messages from someone at work right in the evening. You can say to that person, hey, like, can you please not message me late? And they might not respond. They might say, oh, of course I won't message you late, that's fine. But then they keep doing it and they keep doing it. But what if you reframe that? Hey, if you text at night, I'm not going to be able to get back to you until the next working day. There, you've made your decision. You're very clear. And the boundary is there. It's in place. It's about you. It's not about them. So imagine you've done that and then they text you anyway. What do you do? Remember, the boundary is not about them. So what do you do in this case? There's a few options, right? You can text them back and say, hey, I told you not to text me. But that gives energy, right, to them. That's doing what you said you wouldn't do. So being true to your word, you can choose not to text back. Or if your company allows for a spare phone, a work phone, then take advantage of that offer. And you can uphold that boundary. So this is just an example, but you can think about how this applies to your specific list of the boundaries or areas that you would like to set boundaries for in your life. Okay, so that's communication. All that's left really is to practice, say it out loud, and have those free, open, transparent conversations in a stream of consciousness. Go for it. Here is another reminder of how the menstrual cycle can guide our understanding of boundaries, our expression of them, and how we adjust them. So feel free to use this kind of guide that I've made and let me know in the comments or reach out online. I'd love to hear how you found this, masterclass. And remember that you have the power to guide your life however you want to guide it. We're reclaiming our power as women together. Sending you so much love, and I hope to connect with you very soon.